subscribe.
Welcome to another episode of the Clinical Cookout. I'm your girl, Auntie Quiche. Please read the disclaimer because we are not your therapist. So let's get the show started.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. We are qualified clinicians who will cover various topics on mental health and will sometimes provide community resources. We are not being paid by any organization for our content, and any information we provide is general and pertains to our own personal experiences. We do not provide psychotherapy, diagnoses, or treatment recommendations on air. Any concerns related to your individual mental health should be directed to your medical and mental health professionals. We are not responsible for others' decisions or the subsequent consequences.
All right, y'all. Today, our hot sauce topic is going to touch on something that's very controversial in our society today. Kansas, the state of Kansas had a vote today that did not go the way people thought it would. Kansas is usually a red state. Voting swings red. But when it came to abortion rights and banning abortion in the state of Kansas, it did not go that way. It turned very much blue. So it seems like a lot of conservative women in Kansas voted a different way. They want to maintain autonomy for their bodies and be able to make that decision for themselves. We know that abortion is a very, very major topic in our society, always has been. Roe v. Wade being overturned has been detrimental for a lot of people. Tying that to mental health, it has caused anxiety, panic. Women are like, what do? We don't know if we're going to be able to make this choice for ourselves, or if the state we live in will totally ban abortion and then we have to travel if we need to make that choice. So, how are we doing with this, ladies? What are we thinking about the current abortion situation and women's rights?
I have a lot to say about abortion rights and women's rights. I think that a lot of women went out and voted, typically, probably not the way that they would typically vote. And because it affected their specific demographic is the reason why they came out in such large numbers. And in actuality, we've as Black women have stated time and time again about how we need to address these issues before it gets this far, but no one listened, and now we're here. So I just feel that the Pacific groups who voted only voted because it affected them, not because it affected everybody. So that's where I'm at on that.
Yeah, and I mean, we can keep it real. We could say that that specific demographic is white women. At the end of the day, there's a reason why it was a trending term of listen to Black women. We have been working this. We have been saying this. And for decades, there's been kind of a schism when it comes to feminism, feminist movement and feminism. You had the white feminist movement. That was the first one. But Black women could not align themselves with that because we cannot disalign ourselves from being Black. We are not only women, we are Black women, and that makes a difference. That changes a lot of how we view things, how we are perceived, how our mental health is affected, how that is perceived. So with this particular topic, when it comes to bodily autonomy, historically, we didn't have bodily autonomy. So to have that taken away, that's a big deal for us. And the power of having it is a big deal for us. But white women, on the other hand, let's make one thing clear. Women in general, we live in a misogynistic society. So women in general do deal with the same things, but things disproportionately affect Black women. This is why intersectionality is so important. And that's that intersectionality is the interconnectedness of our societal categorizations. So for example, I am a Black woman. Those are two intersections. If somebody is a Black gay man, those are three intersections. So we have to recognize that when it comes to abortion, even though it affects all women in a particular way, it affects Black and brown women in a different way. It's because of the history of what we are viewed as in this country. When we can look back in history and say, well, we were once 3/5 a person and viewed as property, you don't have possession of yourself. So you don't make those decisions for your body. So now that white women are being affected by this, now they are getting to see what it feels like to not have possession of their body, and they don't like it. But we've been fighting for this as Black women for decades.
So one thing is, and I mean, this is kind of related to the abortion topic, but it's history, and it reminds me of kind of like the Mississippi appendectomy. And so what the Mississippi appendectomy is when a bunch of black women, I mean, women in general, but black women were, like you said, disproportionately discriminated against, and it was state-supported eugenics, in which they thought, you know what, this woman is too poor, she can't have kids. And so people were going in with regular problems like fibroids and uterine cysts, and they were coming out with full-blown hysterectomies. And there was no informed consent given. Everything was done against their will. And it's kind of related to that. It affects all women, but it just, like, even back then, and I think that was in the 60s, body autonomy should have been more prevalent. And so now, you know, fast forward to 2022, body autonomy is still prevalent, and we're still being told what to do with our bodies, which negatively affects anybody's mental health, especially Black women.
Exactly. And I think another major factor of it is that women aren't the people in the seats making the actual decisions for women's bodies. It's men who will never understand what it is to carry a child, what it is to, well, let me just rephrase that. Natural born men will never understand what it is to carry a child, what strain that puts on your body, what strain that puts on your mental state. They don't know that. So at the end of the day, to have men making the decision for a woman's body makes no sense. And like you said, with that situation where they were giving women hysterectomies and, you know, eugenics, that's all important. And like, we can toss it back to Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger, the history there. But at the end of the day, even if we go back to the beginnings of the field of gynecology, Black women were literally lab rats. They thought that we felt no pain, so every experiment was done on our body to further that field. So everything you have now was likely tested on a Black woman who was a slave, and they came up with all these different surgeries and all these different things in the field of gynecology and obstetrician and obstetrics based off of our bodies. We didn't get a say. We just became test dummies. And
Black women were given C-sections with no drugs and everything.
Yes, because they didn't think we felt pain. So this is why this particular abortion issue for Black women has so many more layers to it than for a white woman, even brown women, Black and brown women, women of color in general. It has a lot more layers. There's a lot more history there. There's a lot more that can really be a detriment to the mental health psyche disproportionately for us. So with the Roe v. Wade being overturned, and with each state now having a say on whether they want to ban it totally or not ban it, and women having to decide, you know, do I have to travel to be able to do this? I think a lot of people don't even understand the reason why most women get abortions. It's because it's not as simple as people think. Like, a lot of thought goes into that. It affects you mentally. For like, women feel guilty, they get depressed, they have anxiety, they're scared. Like, a lot goes into that. That is not an easy decision to make.
And why are we choosing to talk just about women making that decision? Men also ask for abortions as well. Like, men ask for them. I know men who have asked for them and who have paid for them. And we always tend to leave men out of the equation as if women get pregnant on their own.
Exactly.
But there's some men who also, I understand body autonomy and, you know, being able to say my body, my choice. There's also two people that make the baby, and there's also a lot of women who make the decision and leave a man without a choice too. And I'm not saying that, you know what I mean, we shouldn't be able to do that, but I'm saying that has hurt a lot of men also. Same as like, you know, I mean, just because they feel the same thing too. Sometimes when you are making those choices, you're not only making those choices for yourself, even though it's a woman's choice. So that reminds me of a lot of mental health problems being confounded in there also, because, okay, I'm making this choice. I'm making the choice to get rid of a child that I made, And it's not always an easy choice for people. But then at the same time, now I got to worry about what Ricky said. Do Ricky want me to get rid of his baby? You know what I mean? I'm having this baby for him. He said he'll take care of it. And then, okay, when I have the baby, is Ricky really going to take care of this baby? You know what I mean? Like, so you have all these things to think about at the same time, thinking about your future. I mean, your past. If I do this, am I going to think about it for the rest of my life? And that's enough to cause anxiety. You know, some people get anxiety just thinking about it. That can be heart palpitations, that can be shortness of breath, that can be, you know, clammy skin, clamming up, sweating, just profusely, just all these symptoms that can bear you down from making big decisions like that.
Well, and this might be the unpopular opinion, and let me be clear. I am not saying that I support banning abortions. But there are a lot of people with mental health issues who get pregnant and choose to have the kid. They choose not to have an abortion. And then this child then picks up on some of those symptoms and becomes a person who is not safe for the community either. So, I mean, but even saying that, I just don't understand why it's even at that level where somebody is like putting a law on it. Like, why? Why is that even a thing?
But it's okay for you to have that opinion. Double down.
That opinion is perfectly fine.
Double down.
And the thing,
that's your opinion.
And the thing with that is what you said at the end is the vital part. Why is this even a thing? Why is it a thing at all? But
this is something that we can't do anything about, though. I mean, you can vote till the cows come home, but the law was already done.
But now. Right, but now let's get a little bit of history too. The history of this law. Right. When Roe v. Wade first went into play, a Republican Supreme Court voted Roe v. Wade in. Republican. Today we attach Republican with evangelical and, you know, all about religion and doing what's right and all of this. We align that today. But back then, Republicans could care less about what a woman chose to do with her own body. Now, because the church and religion has gotten tied into it, that's also added another layer. So that's why it's become a thing, because people want to have control over what other people do. At the end of the day, men in general want to stay in the uterus and vagina of women when they ain't got no business there if I don't want you there.
They be wanting to be in there all the time.
You know what?
We can be honest and say that just because there's a law in place does not mean abortion stops. It just takes away safe abortions. That's all.
Exactly.
Like, women are going to do what they want to do no matter what. And let's talk about the rich women who can have access. It does not matter. This is more for poor people who can't afford to get abortion. Yeah. Rich women and rich men are always going to have access to abortion. Rich people is always going to have access to that. Mm-hmm. So while everybody may seem like just because it's a law, that doesn't mean people gonna follow the law. Yeah. And they've been doing coat hanger abortions for ages.
Yes. And that's the thing. I think they don't realize that if you go back to before Roe v. Wade, there were women literally bleeding out and dying in alleyways and in the streets from trying to perform an abortion on themselves or having someone do it. So is that what you want? You want bodies in the street? Or do you want a medical procedure to be done in a medical office where it's safe? Like, at the end of the day, it always boils down to the question of, for everybody, when does life begin? That's up for interpretation based on a lot of factors. So at the end of the day, people need to just leave this to that woman and her husband or boyfriend or whoever and that doctor. It's nobody else's business.
That's the only person I'm consulting is the doctor.
Right.
The person who went to school to tell me. That's it.
That's it. It's nobody else's business.
I mean, and like I said earlier, if it was something that, like,
I double down.
I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it being a law in the first place. But if it were, I would see where, like, if it were like, okay, people with really severe mental illness, with some of those really severe mental health disorders, who are not safe for themselves, who are not safe for the community. If that was part of the law and like that was banned for those people, maybe I would look at it differently. Unpopular opinion. But then you have the whole thing with misdiagnoses and people being diagnosed with some of these severe mental illnesses based on certain symptoms in the book, in the guide, the DSM-5, and they don't really meet the criteria for that, or it presents differently based on certain demographics. So I mean, it would be really nice to talk about that too, right? The misdiagnosing, and then that is also a part of why some people just don't seek help. So the one thing that I mentioned at the end of the hot sauce was misdiagnosing, which is something that is real big in our community. Well, there's a history of it. Now that we have more representation in mental health care, it's not as much of an issue, but it still is a big issue that we are being diagnosed with based on certain symptoms that could be cultural, could be situational, but we're getting these labels placed on us. And this is kind of sending people the other way when it comes to mental health care. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
That's a good question. And I mean, it's very fruitful to talk about the misdiagnosis of Black children. And if you think about the misdiagnosis, a lot of our diagnoses are done through assessments, psychosocial history. And what psychosocial history is like, did he walk on time? Did he talk on time? What might make this person present like they have ADHD or anxiety? And assessments is a big part of that. And so the APA, and that's the American Psychological Association, that's basically the foundation of psychology, and the governing agency of psychology was big on testing just so that we can help with diagnosis. And so what the APA did was they will give assessment, or not the APA, but psychologists give assessments, and the assessments are disproportionately negatively affect Black people. They now more so it's like it's a lot better because we're more aware of it and we have a bigger representation in the field. But around when the APA was formed, there was test bias. The same way you would go to school and they would say, "Hey, did Brenda have a good breakfast this morning? She had apples and some toast." And a white student might be like, "Yeah, Brenda had a great breakfast." And I'm not saying that all white people eat apples and toast. I'm just trying to go ahead and get me a good example. But a Black child might be like, "Well, no, my mother doesn't cook that in the morning. My mother cooks grits, eggs, and bacon in the morning, and that's what I eat before I go to school." And so it just shows you that there's diversity. And so when the APA was formed, it did not capitalize on that diversity. It was geared towards more white people, just like testing was. And so over time, as people were taking assessments, the Black child that was more hyper might look like they had ADHD. So, and the reason why they might have why they might look like they have ADHD, think about the Black kids. We flipping off of fences. We jumping over fences. We don't have the same, we don't have the same playgrounds in our neighborhood. We hone our energies in different ways. We're, we flipping in the ghetto on a dirty mattress. Just like Lauryn Hill and them said. And you might see in the nicer neighborhoods or white neighborhoods, you might see parks where everybody can hone their energy. They may have more resources. They can take their kids to certain splash pads and things that you don't see in hood areas. And so when the kids go to school and they're told, just sit down, hunker down, we don't have the same moxie in us. We're forces. A lot of times we're a force. And so teachers, other people, psychologists, mental health professionals are apt to look at them like, you know what? This child looks like they have ADHD, when in reality, we might not have ADHD.
And that's why it's important with psychological testing and evaluations to consider the whole person and not just the data, the numbers that you're getting from these tests. So you have several different types of tests that are standardized, which means that they compare your scores to that of other people your age or with your demographics. So your race or ethnicity. So what happens is sometimes it's disproportionate in the norms that they have. So they may have done this test, and gender. Yeah, sorry, I missed that. But they may have done this particular test on a variety of people, but let's say it's 68% white people and then 10% Black people, and the other are other minorities, right? So then when you look at those scores and you're comparing them and you're getting this data, you're getting these numbers, it's just not okay to take those numbers because you're comparing this Black child to white people. Right? We grow up in very different environments. So as a clinical psychologist or a soon to be clinical psychologist, I do a lot of looking at the background information. The data can give me a lot of information, right? It can tell me cognitively, how are you processing information? How are you understanding what you're seeing and what you're hearing? It can also tell me like how you're performing academically with reading, writing, and math. What does that look like? Those are some of the scores that are really like, those are good standardized scores that you can get. And I don't just look at the main scores. I go into it and I look at all of the individual subtests. And I'm not just looking at how it compares to other people. I'm looking at what does this score mean for this person. And it's really important for more psychologists to do that, more Black psychologists to do that, so that when it comes to testing minorities, we're looking at the whole picture. We're not just looking at these numbers and we're like, oh, yep, that number right there compared to these norms with all of these white kids means that you have this or you don't have this. We're looking at the whole entire person. And that's super important. And I stress that. And if I'm ever a supervisor, best believe the Black students underneath me are going to be doing the same thing. Because that's how we make a change.
That's all I was trying to say. That's all. That's what I was saying.
Is it? Okay.
Y'all heard it. You heard it here first.
You know what's interesting too? We talking about testing specifically with kids and assessments now, but then you trickle it to the different testing that you do to diagnose those things that are in the DSM. And the DSM also, if you don't look at the whole person, it's not going to make sense with certain clients. Like a lot of like we talked about before, a lot of the symptoms listed under certain diagnoses in the DSM do not fit a Black woman or a Black man or a person of color. They don't fit. We don't present the same. So, or we might present something and they'll say, oh, she has this. And it's like, no, that's a cultural thing. She don't have that. That's something cultural. So what's interesting.
Who's doing this? Somebody said somebody tick disorder.
Like you pat your head and they think you got a tick disorder. And it's like, no, my head itching.
Yeah.
I just took my braids out. Like, dang.
I can credit, I don't mean to cut you off, but I can credit the DSM in that they have slowly tried to start including cultural aspects in the diagnosing to where you can look in another part of the DSM that's not necessarily like the psychiatric disorders part and see what symptoms apply to certain cultures. They're still lacking in that area, but they're trying to at least start to incorporate that.
I was going to talk about that too, because the APA did an apology. In their apology, they talked about how they supported eugenics, which, and for those that don't know, eugenics is a racial hierarchy through biological features and through biological nature. And so an example of that with the APA is they were saying with assessments, Black people were scoring lower on IQ tests because the IQ test, as I was explaining earlier, might be geared towards white people. And so they were scoring lower. And so the APA was using that back in the day. They're not doing that now. They were using that, along the lines of when it was first formed to say, well, white people should not have interracial marriage with Black people because it's going to be bringing white people down. It's going to be dumbing down the race. And so really, that's what they were trying to say. But really, they were using it as a hierarchy to preserve whiteness and financial wealth. And so I said all that to say that the APA has since formed an apology saying that, basically we're sorry for using eugenics. That's not what we're doing now. That's not representative of who's on the APA panel now. They have policies grounded in ethical values and they use inclusive language and they're elevating their training regarding cultural competency. So it's not so much as bad as it used to be before, but this is the history of why Black people have been resistant to therapy because it's never been made for us. It's not FUBU.
And that just makes me, I'm a little skeptical about that. I'm a little skeptical about that apology.
Maybe I'm a little too, I'm a little bit too much into my woke phase right now, but I'm like, an apology is words. An apology needs action. And at this point, that apology is so late that a lot of that stuff is ingrained in people. There are still white people who believe you are marrying down or you are lowering your standards or your intelligence to date somebody black or of color. So those mindsets aren't going to easily change just because the APA decided to apologize. You still have doctors who disproportionately treat black people differently. You have doctors who don't believe black women when they say they're in pain. Beyonce and Serena Williams almost died in childbirth because they did not believe them when they said certain things were wrong. So an apology now is I mean, to me,
Well,
it's
better
like,
late than never.
and that's the thing. A lot of people say it's better late than never, or it's something, but I'm like, something ain't good enough. For example, with the DSM-5 in particular, they've made changes over the years. Like they've taken things out, they've put more things in, they've made it more inclusive, and that's great. But it's still not enough, and like I'm not sure what to do. There's a black doctor right now who has written a version of the DSM-5 specifically for people of color. I have got to find that name because it's out there. There's a DSM-5 book specifically for people of color. And I cannot wait to purchase it because I just want to see it. I want to see what's in it because that to me is doing the work. Now, some people might say, well, should there be a whole separate book? Yes. Yes, there should, because the change is not happening fast enough to counteract the mindsets that still exist.
Well, I'm skeptical of the apology because I'm still butthurt that the APA won't accredit online programs for clinical psychology, but not just that personal butthurtedness that I have. It's also the fact that like that's excluding a lot of our minority communities. I'm not saying that all minorities are broke and don't have money, but a lot of us have to work. We can't afford to be taking off work to go in person to classes to a brick and mortar school. And the APA just like they apologize for all of this, but they're not doing anything to create a better opportunity for us to access the education so that more of us can be in the field to represent, to help with this misdiagnosing and all of that. So I don't know. I just like, but this could also be that black woman's skepticism, right?
Yep.
Within the mental health care system. So I'm projecting that right now, and it's something that we all feel.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, apology without action is just words. Like, okay.
Yeah, but there's been some action. I won't say that they just ain't did nothing. Like they've incorporated bias-free language. They've talked about educating people on more cultural competencies, and they haven't been always doing that in the past. Like cultural competency has never included gender inclusive language. It hasn't included language to represent ethnic minorities. And so now they're including a lot of that. I probably won't say this, but one of my mentors said a lot of people have to pass on before we see the heavy hitting change. But some people who are getting in now are changing the game slowly but surely. And guess what? Black people, because you know how we do, formed our own version of the APA, the American Association. What is it? The Association of Black Psychologists. Mm-hmm. And then there's another one too. I'll have that for y'all later. Yeah. It's in my paper, but
and honestly, I think that's the real answer. Just like I said, somebody is creating a DSM-5 specifically for people of color. That to me, that's the real answer. We are constantly in this state of we need a seat at the table, at their table. No, just build our own table. Like that's the end of it. That's the real change, because a lot of people having to die really won't matter if mindsets don't change, because those same people raising their kids to believe the same and to do the same. That's not just going to easily fade away.
Well, I'm interested in what Keish got to say, because she's quiet over there, but I know she got something to say on this topic. What's up, Keish?
Really gonna call me out?
I'm gonna call you out. I'm calling you out.
I'm all about the macro system, and so I am a huge advocate for you can apologize, but I need to see those numbers change. If you are going to apologize, what does your hiring practices look like? What does your enrollment look like for Black upcoming psychologists? Because we only represent 45% of all psychologists, and it transitioned from being a male-dominated field to female-dominated, but still there's not enough representation for not only just us, but Asians, Hispanics, and everybody else, Native Americans. Like they're literally like 1 to 2%. So if if there's an apology, there needs to be also some numbers, some changes in numbers to me. So, and I'll be looking forward to that, and I'll keep them accountable. And I need them to lobby a little bit harder when it comes to our profession being paid. It is absolutely ridiculous that doctors, MDs, can be paid X amount of money on the dollar, but yet we are still fighting to even get even close to their range.
Right.
So I need a little bit more of their, whether it's lobbying, I don't know, but I need them to need them to shake and bake out here and
Right.
Run me that money. And
Yep.
I think there is some hierarchy still when it comes to, like Amber was stating about online versus brick and mortar, how they put the APA in place, and it literally excludes people from getting well-paying jobs, like working at the VA, working at certain hospitals. You cannot get in those places without the APA accredited, APA accreditation attached to it. So and those are high paying jobs. And I think about all the, Black and brown folks who may have had to go a different route, who won't be able to get access to the higher income because they took a different route. And so for me, if they really wanted to change things, then we need to see it changed drastically and from a macro standpoint.
It's all stratification.
I just wanted to jump in. I thought I would see something different, but y'all were talking. So I just quickly looked it up. The past and current president of the APA board are Black.
We're Black.
So that's interesting to me because I was like, I know I'm about to see a whole bunch of white people on this board. No, they at least did that. But here's the problem there for me. I hate to say this.
How do you find a problem with that?
I hate to say this. I'm not finding.
I have a problem with it too.
I'm not finding a problem with it because I don't know these folks. But I have to say this. I gotta keep it real. All skin folk ain't kin folk. And at the end of the day, just because they are Black and they are there, you have to sometimes wonder, were they the safe choice? Will they shake the table? Or are they just going to follow protocol and stick to what's already established? Are they going to be change makers? Or are they going to get that position and just hold the tide? Because at the end of the day, every Black person ain't revolutionary and ain't about changing nothing. They just want what they want. They got their spot. They don't care anymore. They climb that ladder. It don't matter.
Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they are change makers. Let's say that. Even if they are, you've got these two Black folks or Black people. I don't even say folks. I'm saying that after you. But you have these two Black men who are on the board with, I don't know, however many white men.
One was a woman. I'm sorry. The past president was a Black woman.
Okay. So two, sorry. I assume man, and that was a faulty assumption on my own. But you've got these two Black people who are in a position of power here. Let's say that they are fighting, they are trying to change. Mm-hmm. When it comes down to voting for things, they're going to be outnumbered. So we need to get more minorities, not just Black people, but more minorities on that board so that it's equal. I'm not saying kick all the white people out. You can keep a couple of them on there, but we want to have more of us so that,
Wait, what?
Let's make it even. Let's have two of each on there, but at least make it like equal so that when it comes down to voting for things, like you have different perspectives that are coming in.
It's 6 out of 16. It's 6 people of color out of 16 on the board that I'm looking at on the website. So it's 6 out of 16.
Well, that's more than the 33 white men that was formed. So
that's great.
Or 31 white men that was formed. So I think that we can't.
Slow?
Because I mean history.
I have an issue with that, Shug. I have an issue with that because we always want
you guys to take put them on the board.
No, that's not what you're saying. Let her finish. Keish, could you finish?
Not you personally, but I have an issue with us always being like, well, okay, that's a change. If that was 1892. It's 2020. 1892. What is you talking about?
Thank you for the scraps in 2022.
2 centuries to get 6 people on the board. I'm not patting them motherfuckers on the back because they want to sit up here and do their minimum.
Get mad, Keish, because it's a don't get mad because it's
No,
things to
keep
get
it
mad
popping.
about.
See, this the Keisha I was trying to get. I knew you had something to say about this. She over there being quiet.
Come on.
Girl, no, bring it out. Bring it out, girl.
Keish, I mean,
I'm so tired of us accepting the crumbs, accepting the bare minimum. We over here praising them for doing 6 people in 2 centuries. Now, I will hope that there was somebody else along the way, but even then, it ain't enough. So I just don't want to pat people on the back for doing the bare minimum.
Right.
And that is exactly what they expect from all of us, to be like, oh, yay, let's give them a hand clap because they did the bare minimum. Absolutely
I'm
not.
with you on it,
Absolutely not. They wanted to change it. And when white people want to change things, they will get to where they need to get to and change it, and will fund whatever they need to fund to change whatever they need to change to benefit them.
That's true.
So I don't want to hear that they doing good with 6 people. I don't want to hear that.
I'm with you, Keish, and that's why I brought up the fact that we don't know what type of people these black folks are that are in these positions. At the end of the day, we got a black man on the Supreme Court, but his name is Clarence Thomas. And so do we have a Clarence Thomas that's sitting as the president of the APA? We don't know.
Well, yeah, we don't know that. That's all I was gonna say. You don't know either way either.
You don't.
And so I'm not patting anybody on the back for doing the bare minimum, but I am saying shit. Like, we have never made progress a lot of times before, and so like, while you don't pat them on the back for doing the bare minimum, you do have to commend that. Like, shoot, we've come a long way from nothing. And so when more of us get on the board, then okay, we can get more of us in. And not only black people, for everybody. Mm-hmm. And then like, like we start getting more in. You have to start somewhere. That's my point.
But starting somewhere is great. But
I'm with Keish too. Listen, I'm on your side. What's wrong with y'all? Shoot.
Look, I'm with Keish, right? You with Keish too.
Getting upset.
But this is the thing. This is the thing, though. It is taking a really long time. And the longer it takes, the more we have people out here in our community that don't want to go get mental health care services because of this bullshit or BS. Sorry. But the longer it goes on, the more our people are suffering. So at some point, like, it needs to move a little bit faster.
I mean, yeah,
we do have people in the community that are black psychologists, and we are working towards better. Just like even me, you, Keish, and Ashley, me, Amber, Keish, and Ashley, we're all working towards that better. But so we're talking about a macro system, right? And we're in the micro system. And so us working in our micro system, you never know which one of us might get on the board. We play our cards right. You never know which one of us might be able to make something better. I know that in the practice that I'm in just right now, or whenever I start my own private practice, I'm going to make things better for us. And I'm going to do that on the level that I can do it. So that's all I'm saying. I mean,
right. We can only do what we can do. That's for sure. We can only do what we can do. But it's just, I think if we want to tie this to mental health and exactly how we feeling in this moment, this is pure frustration. It's frustration at a system that we want to help change so much, but that we know if it has changed by a trickle since 1800s, 1892, like that. When we say it's not enough, it's like it's in that much time. Not when you have so many white people apologizing and so many people in power saying they know, they see it. Well, if you know and you see it, like he said, when they want something to change, it changes quickly. Quickly. So if they wanted things to really be changed, they would be changed. A lot of them really don't want it. They just want to pander. And at the end of the day, we have to accept that that's the case, because had they not been pandering, more would have changed by now. It's been too many. It's been generations, literal generations. And you have people to this day. I have friends and family who flat out say, I want to go to therapy. Can you help me find a black therapist in my area? I go looking and searching for them. And I'm like, dang, man, you willing to do telehealth? Because they live far away. Like, they ain't in your area. You're going to have to do telehealth. And that's sad. That's very sad. And it ties back to what Amber was saying about they won't accredit certain things, or they won't accept online, and everybody can't get to a brick and mortar school. Like, you see changes that need to be made. You see the things that you can do right in this moment, just with the stroke of a pen, and you won't do it. Y'all been talking about testing, and I don't do testing. at all. I don't do well. I can do certain basic assessments, but not the type of testing and assessments that Keish, Suge, and Amber do. So, but as you guys were talking about it, I'm thinking about, and we're talking about misdiagnosis right now, but I'm also thinking about the fact that Black people are underrepresented and underrepresented and have a lack of care or struggle to access care. So it made me think about particularly Black children and particularly Black boys who might be underdiagnosed, who don't get diagnosed, who just get labeled as, oh, he's bad, or he's out of control, or automatically, okay, he does have ADHD, when it could be something else. And then it instantly took me to the school to prison pipeline, and a lot of Black men who are in prison probably have some mental health issues that were never acknowledged and never tested. So yes, we're often misdiagnosed as Black people, brown people. That's absolutely true. But I think we're also underdiagnosed in a lot of areas too, and just labeled as, oh, he's bad or hyper, or she's this or that, instead of really taking a look at what could be wrong.
Yeah, the one thing that really so I used to work as a case manager in Texas, where I would go into the schools and do a lot of skills training with kids, like in the classroom in real time. The majority of the clients that I had were Black children. And it's because the teachers would always label them as ADHD. First of all, don't get me on teachers diagnosing children with psychological disorders. But the teachers at the time, and this was about maybe 3 to 5 years ago, would diagnose these kids with ADHD. I get in the classroom, I'm sitting with the kid, and I'm like, this kid didn't eat breakfast this morning. He literally just told me he's hungry. That's why he's bouncing off the walls. That's why he's defiant. That's why he's yelling. Why don't you get him a snack? And then he will sit his butt down and he will do what he needs to do. So it's also just not considering that there are other reasons for this behavior. It's not always just ADHD for Black children. It's not always just trauma responses, which trauma can present as ADHD. It can present as anxiety as well. And it's also these professionals that are not in the field of psychology or mental health putting these ideas into the parents' heads, and then the parents going and saying, hey, this is what my child has. But I think I'm going off on a tangent. So I just want to bring it back to what I was saying about the misdiagnosis, like just seeing these symptoms and saying, hey, this kid is hyper. This kid has trouble with paying attention in class. So this kid has ADHD. And that's not always accurate.
That's true.
When I think about, the misdiagnosis, I think of how our symptoms just, tend to be different when it comes to, let's talk about Black women. Like when it comes to us having depression and things of that nature, it may look like anger for us versus with other groups, it may look differently, sadness, hopelessness. For us, it may be anger, anxiety, and things of that nature. So when we get misdiagnosed as, being, resistant to treatment or being cooperative or difficult, it does not only the clinician a disservice to have the accurate treatment plan, but also does a disservice to the client by not getting the help that they need. And when we talk about resistance, I think of the term intentionally excluded, because there has been several history articles that talk about how funding was disproportionately filtered down during the Lyndon Johnson era, and how he was the one who started community mental health services or centers, and Black communities were disproportionately funded. So you had the white communities getting more quality care, quality clinicians, versus the Black communities did not. So obviously, when you put clinicians in these communities that are impoverished without having clinicians who look like them, well, yeah, there's going to be some sort of, oh, hold up, who are these people? How are they going to understand my life situation? Or they may even be coming in with their own prejudgments when it comes to that. And then obviously, if the mental health center is not giving what it should be giving to these communities, where do we veer off to? The churches. That's where we veer off to. And the churches has had a stronghold on mental health, because if you just pray about it, it goes away.
Mm.
So, it's like a cycle that we're in, and trying to figure out how to get out of that with diagnosing and being intentionally excluded is challenging.
I think it's when you said if you just pray about it and it'll go away, I do see a lot of that. Like, just even when I practice is little Timmy has a certain degree of resistance to therapy, and this person is likely has a diagnosis. And then sometimes you might hear parents say, well, God will take care of them. And it's no doubt, I never, ever, ever deny anybody's faith. God will take care of that person, but God also gave you mental health professionals. God gave you people who are supposed to help you get through things. And if you had a broken leg and if your leg was hanging on by a thread, you wouldn't say, well, God's going to sew my leg back on. You would say, you know what? The common sense that God gave me tells me to go to the hospital and go get some help for my leg. It's the same thing for mental health. It's still it's still a symptom in your body that's saying, I need help. And it's not okay to ignore it and say, well, you know what? God will take care of it. Yeah, God will take care of it. But faith without works is dead at the same time. So if you are constantly saying, you know what? God will take care of it. God will take care of it. God will take care of it. But you're not actively going to go use the resources that God gave you, then it's not going to get taken care of. Black people not going to therapy is, we know the history behind it, just as we talked about it earlier, but it's also within our family systems. It's also intergenerational trauma too, to where we thought, we too strong. I don't need that. Have you ever talked to a Black man in therapy? Or have you, and who thought, I thought I was weak if I came here. That's also ingrained in us too. Yep. And so the reason why I bring it up about us, we talked about the APA, we talked about the history, but we also have to talk about self-accountability. Yep. And taking self-accountability is not listening to your grandmother saying, don't go on there and go tell all them white people your business. Well, guess what? Sometimes I need to talk to somebody outside of my family system to get the real truth about what's going on inside of me. Because if you're talking to everybody in your family systems, there's going to be some bias. Mm-hmm. You can't go up to your mother and tell your mother, I feel unsupported, because then you have all these issues confounding, and, you're trying to please her, especially if you're a pleaser of, your parent. Some parents don't want to hear what they're doing wrong, or they're going to gaslight you. And so you need to go outside your family system sometimes. And I think that we're told often that it makes you weak to go outside your family system. And that's why we suffer in silence. So we can't always blame everything on outer people. We also have to look within ourselves.
And that's
in our families.
So self-accountability, yes, absolutely agree, Auntie Shug. For sure. However, you said something that made me think that this still ties into what we've been talking about. When somebody's grandmother says, don't be telling them white people your business, it's a reason for that. There's a mistrust of white folks. So this is why we need to be represented. They need to know there are Black therapists, there are Black psychologists, but when we're hard to find, it makes it difficult to make that choice. So for some of them, it's not that they don't want to go. It's that if I'm gonna go, I need it to be somebody that I feel like I can at least trust. And I may have a distrust for white people, or I may have a distrust for a certain segment of society. And then also with that too, it takes me into the idea of Black families and how they view mental health issues. Because historically, it's not just viewed as you have a mental health issue, it's you crazy. So if you're crazy, that's a bad thing. It's negative. Crazy is heard and seen as negative. And then you have the flip side. If we could take it back to church, okay, it's something wrong with him. He a little touched. Let's pray about it. The terminology that we've used in Black families really push people ridiculous. Away. It's like, yep. I don't want to be crazy or touched or none of that. Like, I'm thrown off.
Honestly,
I'm touched.
I'm really proud of my family. I can say that it can change. Let me say that, because I'm really proud of my family. Maybe not my grandma, because she ain't going to therapy. She don't care about that, and she ain't doing it. But I love you, grandma watching this. She ain't on no social media. But,
thank the Lord.
But it can change. So the term crazy, I have flipped out on my family several times, especially after I started this program and I started to learn more about mental health and disorders in our community and all of that. I have flipped out on my family.
Crazy on your family.
I flipped out on my family for using the word crazy when referring to any type of mental health symptoms. Like somebody that's worried about something and they're like having an emotional dysregulation and like having outbursts because they don't know how to regulate that. They don't know what's happening in their body. And you gonna sit up here and call them crazy. How do you think that makes them feel? So you can ask any one of my family members. Maybe they say it when I'm not there. I hope that they have changed it enough that they don't. But they use other terms now, right? Because I've educated them on that. But I'm really proud of them for doing that. I've got my brother who went to therapy. I have my cousin who went to therapy at my suggestion. They were really against it. And they're against it because they're scared of being judged. They don't want to walk in an office and the first thing that someone sees is that you are a gay black man. Oh my God, I don't know what to do with you. So I'm just going to label you, judge you, and then I'm going to diagnose you with something and we just going to talk. Like it's not going to be effective that way.
Right.
So but helping them understand that like one therapist doesn't represent all of us, and every black therapist ain't going to be a good black therapist. They're not going to be on your side. But
and just because your therapist is black don't mean that they're just because a therapist has the same skin color doesn't mean that they're
going to understand you.
I told y'all my therapist is a white woman. I love her.
The main thing is that it can change if we really make an effort to educate our families on what's going on with the people around us and like encouraging them to seek therapy, to go talk to someone, helping explain like what that does. There really is a change that can be made, and understanding that just like people, like one person does not represent every person in this world. We're all different. So one therapist does not represent every therapist in this mental health field. We're all different. We all have different specialties. We have different passions. So really looking at it from that perspective and that mindset can help. But then the question is like, how do you find that therapist, or like, what does that look like? How should I feel when I'm going to therapy? How do I, like, all of those questions kind of come to mind, and then that makes you anxious about wanting to go.
I think that some people forget that they have power in asking and finding a therapist that fit them. I think they automatically assume they just have to take whoever's available, which in this day and age, with therapists being so, I guess, so booked and busy these days and just underneath the water. But I think encouraging people to say, hey, no, you have a right to choose who your therapist is and make sure it's a good fit for you. Just because your therapist is interviewing you does not mean you can't interview your therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that can be nerve-wracking, it's okay to ask this therapist, like, hey, do you believe in this? Where do you stand on this? And understanding if this is going to be a good fit for you. I think there's a way to help them along and giving them that power to advocate for their needs.
All right, y'all. So, foil for tonight's episode. How do we change the mindset? What do we do to change this mindset and help with Black resistance and getting Black people to therapy or taking care of their mental health? What y'all think?
So, I have something. I've already started changing the mindset. Like, I've never had the mindset to where I couldn't go and talk to anybody, but I do come from a family who have the mindset of don't go and tell them white people your business. And therapy doesn't help. I can't express to you how many times I've heard from one of my parents, not one of my parents, from one of my parents, actually, yeah. Therapy does not work. I'm not going to go talk to somebody because it don't help. I'm going to talk to Jesus. And for me and Jesus, we cool and stuff, but I need to talk to somebody he gave me that might be able to help. And so what I've done is I recognize that there's hard times that people go through when they go through puberty. So you'll hear family members say, oh, she's fast. Oh, that little girl's fast. And it's like, she's not fast. She's 12. And so she's experiencing hormones. And there's a lot of things happening in her body right now. She's trying to measure how it is to grow up, go to school, come into her womanhood. Things are happening in her body. And so what I've done is my daughter, I let her talk to a counselor. Does she need it? Can she talk to me? Absolutely. But is it okay for her to go and talk to somebody that's not mommy? Absolutely. And so I've already started working, changing the fabric of my own DNA. And that's the way I think that we can change that, because it's going to be difficult to change 60-year-old mind frames, but we can start working on the next generation.
Yep, I wholeheartedly agree. Same here. My kids have all talked to their school counselor before. They have no problem. My son had a standing appointment with his school counselor. He's like, I'm going to see my school counselor today. And he was comfortable telling me. I don't know if it's because their mommy works in the field that they're comfortable, but either way, I don't care. I tell them, yep, if you can't talk to me or you don't want to talk to daddy, talk to somebody. Talk to your grandma, talk to your aunt, talk to each other, talk to a school counselor. So they already know that. So that is a big way to change the mindset. But I think for older people too, we can still work on changing those mindsets as well by showing them, one, we're out here. We are out here. There are Black therapists. There are people you can connect with out here. And if you don't connect with us, talk to somebody. I don't care if you talk to your homegirl or your homeboy. Talk to somebody. Don't hold things in. Talk to somebody. Because some people will be like, well, I don't want to talk to a professional. Okay, well, still get that out. And if they can't help you, then at least they'll be able to tell you this is a little bit much for me, but let's get you some help, and then you won't feel alone. Because I think a lot of it too is that feeling of aloneness, like I'm the only one. You're not. A lot of people are in therapy. A lot of Black people are in therapy now. And one thing I think also helps is the fact that there's a lot of celebrities who big up therapy, who really talk up about it. There's a lot of celebrities who are like, look, I go to therapy. And at the end of the day, we can talk about celebs all we want, but people they hold weight. Like people, they start trends. You got people out here buying the ugliest sneaker in the world because Kanye's selling it. So, I mean, I'm just saying, if you can do that, then they can convince you to go to therapy too.
Kendrick Lamar also bigs up therapy too. And I feel like since he said something about therapy, a lot of Black men listen to him. And so it might change the fabric also.
Absolutely. Because Kendrick is a woke Black man. So to have somebody who they feel, oh, he woke. Yeah, woke people go to therapy too. It's not just for a certain type of person. It's for any and everybody because everybody has problems.
And I think a big part of shifting the mindset is perspective too. So if you're looking at it as I'm going to this professional, which can be scary. That's like that white coat syndrome or something when you walk into a doctor's office and you automatically get nervous about it. But if you're looking at it in terms, I'm all for talking to your homegirls and your homeboys, but they have a lot of information about your history. Like they have a lot, like they were there for those things. And so they can't be objective, meaning they can't look on that from the outside looking in because they're in it with you. So that's the importance of having a therapist. This is someone who is outside of it all. They don't know about anything about your life unless you tell them. And then you get a chance. It's kind of like a blank slate. You go in and you're just a person to them. And they start to learn things about you. They start to understand your experiences, or at least try to. And then they're able to provide you with a different perspective from the outside. That's the big part that helps kind of shift that mindset. You're not going to somebody to tell them all your business and get them all up in your family's business and all that, which I do get a little bit of that from my clients. I get all the business, but it's not in terms of me being nosy and trying to judge your mama and your daddy and all that. I'm just trying to help you navigate that. You have a mom that says you fast all the time. You've been fasting since you was 12. And you have a mom that's still saying that to you at 34 years old. That's a problem. How do you navigate that? How do you advocate for yourself and talk to your mom about that? So it's just like someone on the outside that's able to look in from an objective standpoint and help you navigate the issues that you're going through.
We are talking about all things relationships, what we deal with, what we don't want to deal with. What do relationships look like? What do they look like when you're dating? What does it look like when you're single? How were you raised to look at relationships?
In 2022, in relationships, if we're both working, I want the load shared. I want, you know what I mean? If I'm coming home and I'm cooking, I want you to take a day. I want to have a don't do day.
Submissive means someone who is ready to conform to the authority or will of others, i.e., meekly obedient or passive.
Oh, no, I'm laughing. I'm laughing because I heard the term obedient and cracked up because I would never do no such thing.
And if I'm being honest, there's a lot of things that me and her do not agree with 100%.
You have a problem with showing your emotions.
I mean, obviously, as a man, Me, I do have problems showing my emotions.
How do you feel about submission?
I mean, I think it's pretty archaic, and that's just however you define it, however you build your relationship. I don't expect my wife to submit to me.
Thank y'all for coming out to watch the Clinical Cookout. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. See y'all soon.